pioneers of the independent networks. I'm your host, Ricky Blues. This is your co-host, Tim Walker. And brrr, the seasons are upon us. We're here celebrating what's the upcoming holidays, and we're coming to you this week live from Santa's workshop itself in the North Pole.
Oh, it's so cold here you can freeze the turnbuckles off a wrestling ring.
And speaking of that, friends, we're hoping to warm you up with the topic for this week's episode.
Wow, now the executives of Penn are piping in the Christmas music.
We are really in spirit.
I'm ready.
So let's do this thing, Tim. Who are we talking about this week?
Let's talk about the TriState Wrestling Alliance out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
What a groundbreaking and original pioneer.
That it was. It was different from anything else at the time.
Absolutely. When we look at the original lineup, and I use lineup as probably the best term that I could think of the organizations that started that whole movement in the mid-'80s throughout that would develop into the landscape that we come to recognize as the Mid-Atlantic. You have to give the nod to Joel Goodhart's original concept in TriState.
And I really think the term hardcore is so overused.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like to use it.
Right.
He brought a harder edge to it, a more violent, brutal type of brawling wrestling that went on there.
And you have to understand at that time, the business end of it, there was a lot of promoters tied together. Joel was involved, I think, in radio.
Yes,
in
WIP.
In the early days. And he got himself involved in wrestling, and one of the promoters that was running around in Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, Pennsylvania was Ed Zahn.
Right.
And Ed was helping out Phil Leibelsberger, who was the bounty hunter, in a group that was called the AWF?
The Atlantic Wrestling Federation.
Atlantic Wrestling Federation out of Hanover, Pennsylvania, and actually York, Pennsylvania. And Ed was doing the promoting for that show, and one of their first shows was in 1988.
Champion, the Bounty Hunter. Bounty Hunter, welcome to York, Pennsylvania.
It's a pleasure to be here, I guess.
Now listen, I know you say I guess because you have some concerns about this match against Bam Bam Bigelow because promoter Ed Zahn, you think he's done you a little dirt here, don't you?
Well, of course. If you listened to the radio and heard the TV, you'd understand. Ed Zahn, I don't know if he's got Don Morocco on his payroll or what. He brings Bam Bam Bigelow in to try and take the belt. That's fine and dandy. I can live with that. But then he's got to bring Don Morocco in. What is it, 2-on-1? I mean, why don't Zahn get in there and referee it himself?
Ed brought in and kind of kick-started the career of Joel Goodhart by bringing him in as a personality and introducing him to the wrestling business during that show.
And Joel was the ring announcer during those shows.
He sure was. And that was the AWF first venture into television broadcast, and that was their TV program. So Ed brought him in, kind of gave him a little bit of a start, and then all of a sudden there was a partnership.
It's a cross
built
promotion.
out.
Because
Absolutely.
Joel on his radio show then would announce to the fans, I'm going to be in York, Pennsylvania tonight. Come on down to York and let's see Bam Bam Bigelow and Don Morocco and the Bounty Hunter.
Right. And from that too, Joel, because there was already an existing base in the Philadelphia area, to a degree, grabbed up on some talent that had been there. Would that have been like DC Drake?
Larry
Winters, would have been Tony Stetson, Johnny Hotbody,
King Kalua, Tom Brandy.
Right.
And at that time too, they were developing some new talent through the wrestling school there in Philadelphia.
Right.
Such as JT Smith.
JT Smith.
The Sandman.
Right. And the Sandman, the incarnation of that Sandman wasn't the cane swinging, beer swilling, hardcore barbed wire hack guy that he showed up in WCW and ECW. No, it was much different. It was almost like a Ray Odyssey character where he was a surfer with a large boogie board.
And the suit.
And the wetsuit, right, and the wetsuit. So very, very interesting beginnings.
For me, one of the big contributions the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance made was their development of the Supercar.
Absolutely, in a time that you didn't have the development of a supercar. You might have had one or two big names, and then everything else was populated by the local wrestlers. But they stepped it up, Tim. How did they do that?
Well, the standard independent card at that time was to bring in one nationally known name. Whether it be a Honky Tonk Man or Bam Bam Bigelow or Jules Strongbow,
right?
They would bring in one nationally known name and the rest of the card was filled with local wrestlers. The TriState Wrestling Alliance totally threw that out on its ear.
Right.
They promoted big buildings with big budgets,
Yep.
big crowds, big talent, big money going out though.
That's true. It's true. If you want to dance, you're going to have to pay the band.
And they had a pretty damn good band.
They did. You're not kidding. And the thing that I look at about what TriState did was actually gave legitimacy in the wrestling purview to this area. And being that there was a number of promoters that were very, very key in those early days, there was already that understanding, because the big names saw, okay, these guys are working together, they're each paying me, the promotions are thriving, I want to go where the money is, I'm an independent contractor, I'm going to be paid, these guys, I see the legitimacy there, I'm going to go, and I'm going to spread the word to the people in the business that I know. And they did that. And that helped develop later some of the super cards that I'll describe that other promoters put together.
One of the biggest things that I remember about TriState Wrestling was the fact that they brought in the Sheik.
Oh yeah, the original Sheik.
The original Sheik.
Right.
The uncle of Sabu.
Right.
Wow. They brought him in twice that I remember, and he wrestled Abdul the Butcher on both those cards in 1992, I believe, in Pennsylvania Hall inside the Philadelphia Civic Center.
Right. Very brutal matches, but also matches that were used as the defining parameter of the promotion. That gave them the kickoff point, which later became hardcore.
And at that point, too, you didn't see the Sheik and Abdul the Butcher anyplace else, wrestling each other anyplace else on the East Coast. If you wanted to see that match, you made your way to Philadelphia, and you knew the historic significance of that match because Joe was on the radio every week telling you how important this was.
Right.
What a significant match in the history of Pennsylvania wrestling this was going to be.
And it was extremely incredible. And as time passed on with that, Joel's business expanded and other people became involved. Folks like Todd Gordon. And Todd and Joel were partners for a period of time. And they developed the promotional prowess to bring more people in because there was money infused for a period of time. And they were developing. But that partnership didn't last too long.
No, unfortunately it didn't. With the amount of talent that was flown in for each of these cards in Philadelphia, it got to be really expensive. When you think about Abdul the Butcher, the Sheik, Eddie Gilbert,
Oh yeah.
Cactus Jack, Terry Funk, Jimmy Valiant, Al Perez, Jim Cornette, Stan Lane. They were great talents.
Absolutely.
But they came at expense too.
A big cost. But nonetheless, they weren't there phoning it in. They were there performing and putting on legitimate shows. Much like you would have seen them when they were working in either AWA, NWA, or WWF at the time. They weren't phoning those matches in. It wasn't what you saw later on the independents where you brought a name in and they didn't bump and they didn't this and they didn't that. Those guys worked their asses off in those matches.
And they deserved every cent that they got.
Absolutely.
Believe me.
Absolutely.
Another one of the things I think that gets forgotten about Joel Goodhart is the fact that he started a fan club through his radio
That's
show.
right. He absolutely did.
He'd promote luncheons,
Where you could meet the wrestlers and have lunch with the wrestlers.
have lunch with them, get autographs, pictures, all that sort of thing. That was really the precursor to a lot of the fan conventions now.
You're right. Think about that. Where you've got these national stars, the local stars, all coming together and providing the fans an opportunity to sit and have lunch with them and talk shop.
And to promote Ric Flair's 40th birthday party.
Right.
I think that was just a feather in his cap that a lot of people forget about.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did that through the use of his avenues that he had in the radio world.
And Joe really provided a lot of news
Right.
on his radio station. He was broadcast every Saturday morning between 8 and 9 on WIP 610, which was a fantastic outlet, a great station to be on. And not only would he provide news throughout the wrestling world, because Joel had connections everywhere, he'd provide people news of what's going on in Memphis.
Right.
You know, before anybody even knew about what was going on, Joel was connected in there. He knew, and he'd give you news about that. And he'd have wrestlers like Eddie Gilbert and Jerry Lawler on and do interviews. As a matter of fact, some of those feuds from Memphis would bleed over into his promotion in Philadelphia.
And that was an awesome outlet for fans to capture more information.
In addition to promoting his shows, he also was able to promote bus trips. There are fans from Philadelphia that every year would go down to Memphis for a week.
That's right, to get down there and enjoy what Jerry Lawler was doing in his organizations. Oh wow, what a neat and novel idea that brought the wrestling communities together. Talk about trading tapes at the Civic Center. This was even better. You were going in person because of a wrestling organization that believed in their fans.
It was amazing the wrestling talent he brought in. Not only men, but he also brought in the top women of the day, like Medusa.
Right. Not only did he bring in the top talent that was available on the circuit, but he still built in his own storylines with those wars between DC Drake and Larry Winters, which are still extremely historic, and didn't stop at one level. Then there was Tony Stetson and Johnny Hotbody. Talk about an action-packed supercard. You had that. That was a great presentation given by TriState.
Man is a disgusting, vulgar, rude, crude, obnoxious individual. He eats raw meat. He spits it out. Last just about now, I think it's 5 nights ago, in one of his first title defenses. What's this? What's this? Winters trying to turn DC around, and he does it. He floors DC Drake with a punch. Drake up on his feet. Drake back into the corner. Winters all over Drake. Taking it to the champion. DC into the corner. All over the man. And Damian Kane is going crazy outside the ring. Dragging his man outside the ring. Larry Winters now wants DC Drake. Damian going, no. Damian trying to take the momentum away from Larry Winters. And that will be hard. Larry now coming outside the ring. That could be a mistake. DC very upset. 5 nights ago, in one of his very first title defenses. Uh-oh, look at this obvious double teaming. Oh, Winters is hurt from that. DC Drake, one of his first title defenses, brought a raw piece of meat out to ringside, sucked the blood out of it, and spit the blood right into a fan's face. Larry knocked into the first row. DC now bringing him back in the ring, momentum taken away from Larry Winters. DC Drake now coming into the ring. And Drake is absolutely out of his mind. Picking him up. Oh, Damian now attacking Winters from the outside. I don't really have to describe that maneuver, do I? Damian now throwing Winters back into the ring. Drake yelling at the fans. Drake now turning around, he notices Winters, and now he's going back after him. DC Drake now right on top of us. Oh, I want to raise. Oh, do I want to raise. DC Drake now choking Larry Winters on the ropes. Damian Kane up on the outside. Interference. They need 2 referees for these two. They need 2 referees for these two. DC Drake now choking Larry Winters on the ropes. Damian Kane from the outside. Damian saying more. My man ain't disqualified until the ref counts 5. Damian Kane. Rule number 107 in the good book of professional wrestling. And Damian Kane choking Larry Winters outside the ring. DC Drake now approaching Winters, pulls him up by the hair. This is it. Here it comes. Big body slam. And Drake just doesn't know what to do with himself. He's so psyched up. He's so incensed. Now going out after the fans. This man has attacked more fans than any wrestler in recent memory. Drake already having spent 6 separate nights in jail for such actions. And Winters has him rocked. Larry Winters now throwing DC Drake into the rope. Nice dropkick by Winters. Drake tried to block it, but he couldn't do it. Drake outside the ring, and the fans are on their feet. The fans are on their feet as Larry Winters now comes outside the ring and approaches Drake. Damien backing off, and he shoves Drake into the first row. Drake being massaged by his manager, the self-proclaimed godfather of professional wrestling, Damien Kane. And Winters now taking it to Drake. Obvious closed fist punches right to the forehead of DC Mad Dog NWF Heavyweight Champion Drake. And he comes into the ring now, and Larry brings him in the hard way. Oh, Larry Winters is taking it to DC Drake. And Drake is in a lot of trouble, the championship. Larry Winters with a leapfrog, comes to the other rope. Power slam! Hooks the leg! He got him! What a turn of events! What a turn of events!
The great top talent and the great developing talent. I mean, no wonder it drew several thousand people a night there to Philadelphia. It was just amazing, and the talent from all over the country, and talent that people hadn't seen before too.
Now, one of the other things too that TriState did was Joel, being that he was involved with other promoters, and those promoters were learning by osmosis the nature of those cards, helped develop supercards for other organizations. And one of the things that I'll always harken back to was I look at Zahn and what Zahn did with Win. And him taking it one step further. Yep, we're going to use a lot of national talent, but then I'm not afraid to let my product shine through the shining lights of other organizations. And what I mean by that is when he put together his super cards, yep, he would use Ivan Koloff and Don Morocco and Nikolai Volkov and the Honky Tonk Man and Bam Bam Bigelow. But then he would also invite the Virginia Wrestling Association Tag Team Champions to defend against his Win Tag Team Champion. But you also had Chris Candido defending his WWA Light Heavyweight Championship against Jimmy Giannetti from Georgia. He brought in the Lightning Kid, the GWF Light Heavyweight Champion, to face Ricky Blues. There were so many different elements that they learned from each other to give that type of presentation, and you don't see anything like that today. That was, I mean, you're talking pulling people from 6 states, and the card wasn't a 15-20 match card. No, you were still talking about 8 or 9 for TV taping, because Mike Nichols was TV taping at that time.
Right.
But it was a neat little presentation.
I think Joel's overlooked a lot when we think about wrestling in the Philadelphia and Mid-Atlantic areas.
And I think on this show, that's what we're doing here, paying it forward. But I agree 100%.
He really was a pioneer because no one did that before.
Not at all.
No one brought that level of talent. No one booked that kind of a building. I mean, he brought independent wrestling to the forefront.
He did.
Of people's attention.
And Joel wore many hats, like you said. Not only did he keep the guys happy, but he kept that promotion running for a period of time. And from that promotion, other promotions that actually got the national syndication nod were born. So for us at PIN, we look at Joel Goodhart, we look at TriState Wrestling as a true pioneer of the independent networks. For this show, I'm Ricky Blues, this is Tim Walker, and we're thanking you for watching this episode of PIN, and hoping that you'll enjoy not only the Christmas music, the Christmas spirit, and the holidays that are upon us, but looking forward to seeing us again next week for another episode of PIN as we try to bring you one more pioneer.